Hello everyone, I'm glad to welcome you to this tutorial. My name is Blessing, and in this video we will be looking at the average function and its different variations. We'll be looking at the average function, the Averageif function, and the Averageifs function. If you have not watched our previous videos on the if function, the ifs function and the likes, please, I would like you to watch that first, as that could give you understanding of how we apply the if function. Okay, let's get right into what we have for today. What is the average function and how do we use it? Just as the name implies, average, we use that to find the mean, the average. I normally explain to my students and I tell them when we are looking for average, we're kind of looking for what will the amount be if every donation is or every entry is shared equally among everybody. Take for example, if I'm looking for average scores of students, what will each student score if all the scores are actually shared equally? Something like that. That's what average means. Now let's look at our table. This is a table of donors, probably donors for a particular NGO or something like that. We have their names, we have their genders, we have their email addresses, the sector where they work, perhaps the dates when they joined or when they became members, and donations, and city where they reside. Okay, so we are going to use this table to answer the following questions and also to explain the functions. So first of all, average function. What is the syntax if we want to find the average function? So you will say the equal to, and then you hit the average. Equal to average. It could be all uppercase, or you can just leave it. It's not case sensitive. Okay, let's zoom that in a little bit, and that is it. So then you include the number, or number one, number two, depending if it's different. You are just entering the numbers one after the other. If you want to have the average for a particular range, you just type in your range. Fine, so let's answer this question. Say we should find the average donations. So this is the column where we have our donations and we want to find the average. So we just hit equal to average, and then we have G2, which is the first cell there. The last cell is G1475. And if you don't know which cell is the last, you could just say average, open bracket, hit the first one, it enters G2, shift control if you are using Windows, and then down arrow key, and it selects the last cell, and then you hit your equal to sign. And that is our answer. All right, we can see it entered in the average in the formula bar here, equal to average, and then this is our table name and this is the column name. So it gives us the average for all the donations, the average of all the donations. All right, let's go to the second one. The second one is the Averageif. Where or how do we use the Averageif? What is the Averageif function and how do we use it? Now the if in front of the average signifies one condition, so we use the Averageif function to get the average or the of entries, the average of entries that meet a particular condition. The condition could just be anything, but just one condition. All right, let's say we want to get the average, like the example we have here. We want to find the average donations by males. So males, there is the condition. We want to get the average donations as long as the donations are made by males. We could also say, okay, we want to get the average donation of all donations that are less than this amount or greater than this amount or even equal to this amount, thereabout. Okay, so let's look at this example. It says find the average donations by males, the average of all donations made by males. So we say equal to, and then as usual, this is our, let's look at the syntax for our Averageif. First of all, it says you enter the range, more like the criteria range, where you are trying to apply the if function or the condition, and then the criteria, and then the average range. What does that mean? This average rate can be optional. If the criteria range and the range where I am obtaining the average is the same column, I don't need to. Let me explain that very quickly somewhere different. Let's just come here. So let's say we want to find, please, this is just an example separate. So let's say we want to find the average for donations less than 3,000. I think we have an example like that. Let's say 4,000. Okay, so the average for donations, the average donation for all donations less than 4,000. Now we are applying the condition on this column and also trying to obtain the donation from this column. So in that case, we will not need to be repeating the range. Let's type in average if. So we will not need to repeat the range. Since the range and the average range are the same, we will not need to repeat it twice. We just include one and that works. Okay, let's just do that. So average range will be G2 to G1475. And what is the condition? We say less than 4,000. And that works. We will not need to start repeating the average range again. And when we hit that, it gives us the average. So I just wanted to do this to show you situations where you may have to include both the criteria range and the average range. Back to our example, find the average donations made by males. Let's zoom in a little bit and we will say, we enter our formula Averageif and donations made by males. So the criteria range here, the first range is actually the criteria range as it were, and we say males. So where do we have our males? We have them in column C. Let's just use our formula bar here. So we will say C2 to C1475. And what is the criteria? Males, that's for M. And then what is the average range? The column where we are trying to find the average, or where we have our entries that we'll be using to find the average. So that will be G2 to G1475. And when we hit our enter key, it gives us the average donations by all the males. Okay, so let us check our syntax just one more time. It says the range, and then this is the criteria or the condition, and then this is the average range. Second example, it says find the average donation in 2021. In 2021, these are our dates. So we will need to create a separate column where we extract the date from these dates. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that very quickly. So let me insert the date somewhere here. So I right click and then I say insert, and let me change this to year. Yep. And then let me come to the first one here. I want to convert this just to extract the date. Now let's see, first of all, before we do that, let us see the data, the type of the formatting. So this tells us here that this is a date format. It's in date format. I don't want it to be in date format. I just want it to be in general format. So I'm going to select every cell here and I'm going to change it to number. The reason being that, okay, let's leave it in date format. Please, I'm not trying to digress. If I leave it in date format here and I use my function, it's going to give me a lot of trouble. So let me undo that and just leave it in number format or even in general format. Okay, I think that will be better. Let's just leave it in general format, no specific format. So how do we convert this to year? I will say equal to year and then F2. So I would want it to extract the year from this, from each of this, so it fills everything up for me. That's too small. Let's expand it a little bit. So this is 2021, this is 2018. So I'll now use that to answer my question number 2 under the Averageif. So it says find the average donations in 2021. So I first of all start with my equal to sign and Averageif. First thing, the range where I am applying the criteria, and that is the it's now my G, pardon me. So let's do that, no problem. So that will be G2 to G1475. And then what is the criteria? 20, I don't think I need to put that in quotation marks, 2021. And what is the average range, which is actually now my H column, so H2 to H1475. And when I hit the enter key, it gives me the average. I can decide to reduce the number of decimal places. Let me just hit this a couple of times and it takes it to 2 decimal places. Okay, all right, I hope the syntax is clear. I didn't zoom while I was doing that. Okay, so you have the Averageif, and then this is the range where you are applying your condition, your criteria, which is GG, and then 2021, the condition I am testing for 2021, right? And that is also here. And then my average range, which is this. Okay, and that gives us that. Now we come to the next one, which is the average ifs. I will want to collapse some columns. Let me just hide this so we will have a little more space here. Now the average ifs. The average ifs is like the average function, just that while in the average function we apply just one condition, one criteria. We test to just one criteria. In the average ifs, we are calculating the average for entries that meet several, not just one condition, several conditions. So look at this example. Let's look at the syntax first. So I will say average if, and then look at the syntax. I enter okay, that's ifs, I beg your pardon. So I start with the average range, the range where I want to calculate the average, which actually in this case could be the 2020, the H column, and then the first criteria range, I beg your pardon. So you enter the average range and then the criteria range. Let's zoom in a little bit. Yeah, so we have the average ifs function, and then you say the average range where I am calculating the average, which is the H, and then the criteria range, first criteria range, the range where I want to apply the first criteria, and then probably a second criteria range and its criteria, third criteria range, as many criteria, as many conditions as I want. So let us do that. The first example here says that we should find the average donations by females in the trading sector. Average donations by females. So we have two conditions here, females and then trading sector. So let's start. Average range is H2 now to H1475. The criteria range, first criteria, so I can take the females first or the trading sector first. It actually doesn't matter. Females, the gender is in C. So let's just come up here and we say C2 to C1475. And what is the criteria? Females, F. Put that in quote, please. It's a string. And then the second criteria, services, right? Services. Okay, trading sector, I beg your pardon. So the next thing is the criteria range 2, which is this. And that will be D. It's not D, it is, because we've hidden our D. So C, D, E. So that will be E2 to E1475. And the next thing, what criteria are we testing for? Trading. Yep. Yeah, so that gives us the trading sector. So what have we done? The average range, where we have our entries that we would like to find the average, and then the criteria range 1, which is for females, and we are testing for the criteria females. Criteria range 2, that is the sector, and then we are testing for trading. And when we hit our enter key, we have this. Of course, we can decide to reduce the number of decimal places. Let's just say it's 2 decimal places. And that is that. Okay, so let's look at the second example. The example says we should, what is the average donations by Liverpool males in 2019? Here we have 3 conditions. 2019, males, Liverpool. Oh, we still have our column for dates for year here, thank God. So we have Liverpool, we have males, and then we have 2019. So we start Averageifs, and then we open a bracket. What is the average range, which is our H2, right? H2 to H1475. And what is the criteria range? So we can test for any of the criteria first. We can decide to go for Liverpool first. Let's start with that. It's closer. So we say I2 to I1475. And what is the criteria? Liverpool. I hope that is spelled correctly. It's not case sensitive, so you can use whether uppercase or lowercase. It works just fine. And then let's test for the year, and then we'll go for males later on. That will be G2 for males. So for the year rather, G2 to G1475, G2 to G1475. And then we test for what? 2019, right? 2019. And then the last criteria will be males. Where do we have the gender? That is in C. Let's come up here. And then we have our C2 to C1475. And then what is our criteria? males, right? Yeah, so that will be M. Let's just be sure. Liverpool males in 2019. So what do we have? We have our average range. We have the first criteria range, which is for the city. So that's I2 to I1475. Yep. And then the next thing we are testing for is Liverpool. So for the city, we are testing for Liverpool. Now the next one, our next criteria range, we are trying to test for the year. So that's G2 to G1475, and the year is 2019. And the last one, we are trying to test for the gender, C2 to C1475, and that is males. And when we hit our enter key, we have this. Did I format that earlier? Okay, it's fine. Sorry about that. So it actually doesn't have any decimal places. So that will be that. So we have looked at the average function, we have looked at the Averageif function, and we have looked at the Averageifs function with examples to follow. Now we have an exercise here. I hope you guys like trying your hands on exercises. So the first one says you should find the average donations made in 2018 and then find the average donations for amounts less than 3,000. All right, let me have the answers in the comment section and we will interact there. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Share it with your friend, invite people to subscribe if you have subscribed, and if you haven't, please, I would want to have you as a subscriber. That will really help our community to get larger and larger. Thank you so much, everyone. See you in the next video. Bye.